Friends, hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, my podcast where I just sit down with other writers and chat. Before I get to today's guest, go check out my website, Unbound Writer, at unboundwriter.com, because by the time this episode airs, we should have some good information and perhaps the ability to book the writing retreat we are going to be offering in Paris. That's not Paris, Texas. It's Paris, France, next year, May 3rd through 6th, 2027. It's myself, Alex Finlay, Clemence Michelon, and unnamed guest stars at this point. 4 1/2 days of instruction, nice cocktail party, and nice literary tour. It is going to be amazing. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, go to unboundwriter.com, check out the retreats page. If the details aren't there yet, you can at least sign up on the interest form, and I will email you as soon as the full details and ability to book are there. All right, let's get into it. So today I had my friend Angie Kim on the show. So I met Angie because I was asked to interview her when she was coming to a library here in Colorado. We actually did 2 sessions because she's so popular. We did 2 sessions. We did like a mid-afternoon interview, and then we did an evening interview. We got a lot of time in the green room together. So I really got to know her well. Realized we had kind of met before at Thriller Fest. But Angie has 2 books out. Her most recent book, which is critically acclaimed, instant New York Times bestseller, Good Morning America book club pick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is called Happiness Falls. You have probably heard of it. But she's got quite the pedigree when you read her bio, and then we got into her background quite a bit in the show, and it's so interesting because it's her background is really a life of struggle. Kind of all starting from coming from Seoul, South Korea to the U.S. as a middle schooler with 0 English skills at all, and just kind of what all the damage that it causes to your psyche when you are trying to just climatize to a new culture. But she ended up going to Stanford to study philosophy, but she also was into theater in high school. And then she went to Harvard Law School, where she was an editor of the Harvard Law Review. And so she was going to become a litigator because, as she says in the podcast, litigating was like performance acting. That's what she really wanted to do. But when she realized that was only about 5% of the job, she only lasted 5 or 6 years. So it wasn't until her 40s that she really wanted to get into writing. And so we kind of just talk about that journey as well. So as she says that, writing is her 5th career, and it's been very successful so far. The 2 books that she has out have done really, really phenomenally well. And she is a very valued member of the writing community and beloved by many readers around the world. So it's kind of a dream story for most writers, coming from somebody who didn't speak English at all to being a best-selling novelist in that language X number of years later. So, but she's very easy to talk to. We did a great storytelling. She's somebody I could just sit down, have a cup of coffee with, and talk for a couple hours. So it was nice to catch up with her. This is my conversation with Angie Kim. So, and I want to get into a little bit of what we kind of talked about in Broomfield, but what was interesting to me was hearing about you coming from Korea here as a kid, and the language barriers. And I'm always so, because I had a call earlier with Clemence Michelon, and I'm always so impressed by people who have a second language and then like, oh, I'm just now going to write best-selling books in my non-native language. It just is so impressive to me, even though, yes, I understand, you've been rooted in learning English for quite some time, but it was a little bit of a struggle.
Yeah, it was a struggle at first, certainly. And I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of stayed away from Writing, for a really long time. I didn't really think of, English or having anything having to do with English as being a forte for me because there was just so much trauma around middle school when I came over from Korea and I didn't speak the
So
language
you
and
came
being
over
made
for
fun
middle
of.
school years.
Yeah, and
That's
when I was
really
11.
tough.
Yeah, so middle school is so tough anyway.
Right.
And so coming over then and then, feeling like I didn't belong, not looking like anybody else, wearing really weird clothes that nobody else was wearing. This is during the 80s, like during
Right.
the whole preppy,
Right.
and we could not afford those Izod shirts with those alligators or polos or anything like
And you
that.
came over with zero English language skills or very little, or yeah.
Zero. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, my dad, I think, taught me how to say hello and goodbye on the airplane. I had this book that was supposed to teach you how to speak the most basic English conversational language, like phrases.
Yeah.
But like, for example, one of them is, where is the lavatory?
Right. And
And
nobody says lavatory. They're like,
well,
what?
exactly. Nobody says that. And also, like Koreans can't say v, like the V sound
Ah.
and the R sound. And so it came out as laboratory. So
Right.
then, the teachers, when I ask, like, I'm just saying that word over and over again. And they're like, oh, here's this geeky Asian kid. She wants to see the science lab because
Right.
that's like the
Right. And you're going
stereotypical
over and
Asian
peeing
thing,
in the
right?
science lab.
Yeah. And so, so that, and so they're taking me to the lab and I'm like, what the fuck is going on
Wow.
here? Like, yeah, that was not the first day of school was not a good day. And yeah, so between all of those things, and then once I started sort of picking up English, I think you pick up listening, receptive language comes more quickly
Of
than
course. Yeah.
expressive language. And so I could understand much more than I could say.
Sure.
But because I still couldn't say anything, and certainly not with like the right grammar and, and the accent and all of that sort of stuff, everybody still thought that I couldn't speak English or understand it at all. And that's when you start realizing, like, oh my God, these people don't think that I can understand anything. So they're talking about you in front of you, which is like a particularly humiliating thing, to
And I
go
think
through
you
in
even
middle
said in
school.
Broomfield that it extends to them thinking that you're just dim in general,
Well, and
which
not
is
just
so
them,
like naive.
right? But not just them thinking it, but you feeling it yourself. Like, so
Mm,
I really felt so stupid.
mm.
And which is funny because I kept on trying to tell myself, it's not like my brain has changed. Like I'm still the
Totally.
same person. I can still do math at least,
Right.
like things like that. But not being able to speak and not being able to understand, but I mean, even more than the understanding, not being able to say anything and articulate your thoughts makes you feel thoughtless, makes you feel like you have no thoughts, like you have no worth and you have no intelligence. And so that's really the first time that I really started realizing something that I had never thought about, which is that we all, including, certainly did this as well, we all equate oral fluency with intelligence.
Hmm.
And so not being able to speak, I felt really stupid. And I think I carried that with me even after I learned English and even after I started being able to speak. And it's not just for English either. It's like it carries over into other languages. So I
Sure.
took, French in high school, and I was supposedly, like fluent or whatever by college. And I went to France over the summer for like a summer program or whatever. And I could not bring myself to say anything in French because I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At the
Totally.
prospect of speaking. And now I'm doing the same thing. Next year, I'm planning to go back to Korea for the first time since I've been here, which
Oh,
is
wow.
bizarre. I know, right?
Wow. Since middle school.
Since middle school. Yeah.
Wow.
We had plans, like lots of other trips, but like weirdly, like, like some medical issue would come up, and
Right.
or one time like I was pregnant, and I found out that I was pregnant, like I was far enough along, and and something was happening with the pregnancy such that the doctor was like, you can't really, like
Yeah.
we don't want you traveling, like stuff like that. And then another time there were like riots and stuff in Seoul, and so we
Wow.
decided not to
Wow.
go.
Well, fingers
So
crossed we're not jinxing it
yeah,
for next year.
but I'm like really stressed because I don't speak Korean very well anymore. I can
Yeah.
still understand everything,
Right.
but speaking is kind of hard for me. And also, not only that, but here I am an adult and I speak at like at best at a 10-year-old level, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's going to be an interesting trip to, see how I feel about being Korean and looking Korean, and having grown up there, but then not being able to really speak very well. So that's going to be really interesting.
And I would think the other thing coming to the States as a middle schooler and going through everything you were talking about, it feels like um, the other offset of that is it drives you inward, right? So socially, you're not just approaching, which is hard to do anyway as an eighth grader,
Right.
but socially, you're just like, I don't have any friends because I'm not
Yeah.
approaching anybody.
Yeah. And also, like, you start thinking about the meaning of friendships too, because there were some kids who were very nice to me from a kind of like I was their pet project kind of,
Uh-huh.
thing. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like, um, almost like they were doing public service,
Right. Right. Community hours.
know, right? By being nice to me and by inviting me to do things and whatever, but in a very performative way that
Hmm.
we hadn't really thought about back then because we didn't have social media and stuff like that. But I was thinking about this the other day. Like if we did have social media, I wonder like what kinds of things people would have like posted, especially those girls, the girls who took me on as their favorite pet project kind of
That's so
thing,
interesting.
what
Yeah.
they would have done, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
think about that a lot in terms of just smartphones and social media in general about, people of our age who didn't have that growing up. Would you have ever become a writer if your formative years were spent scrolling instead of reading,
Absolutely. Instead of reading, and in my case, I really think what fed my love for story is that I didn't have many books that I could read because there was a time when I couldn't read English,
Right.
and I only had a few Korean
Right.
books that,
Access to Korean books back in the 80s in the
right.
States was
Yeah,
not easy, I'm sure.
exactly. And so I think I brought over this set of books, but it was like 7 books. And so I read the same things over and over again. And so I basically was like writing essentially fan fiction in my head and like acting it out.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like of alternative timelines, or
Yeah.
what's going on in between the scenes, or what's, sort of going on after the story is over, that kind of thing. And so I think that's what fed, my love of thinking about, fiction and making up these worlds and characters and things like that. And if I had just like had a constant source of entertainment, by
Totally.
virtue of having this nifty thing, and also if I could like, zoom like do Kakao Talk or WhatsApp with my friends,
Right.
that I wonder how it would have changed the way that I made friends, because I was basically cut off from my friends
Right.
and
You're on a
from,
deserted island.
yeah, and from Korean and everything, and I was just like forced into this weird world. And so it really it does make me, there's definitely a part of me that's like, when I'm talking to like, kids who are immigrants and things like that, I just kind of want to be like, you have no idea how
Right.
easy you have it in some ways, because you
Oh,
can actually
totally. Yeah. Much
still
more
keep in
connected to
touch.
people who speak their language. And, but it also, I mean, and the other thing is too, is like all that pain that you went through, also it, it almost forced you to go through this reawakening that you didn't have this comfort. You didn't have this ability to communicate in your native tongue as much. And that probably really broadened your horizons much more than somebody who can come here and still be really immensely connected and not having to be forced out of their
Absolutely.
shell.
Right. Because then the total immersion concept doesn't really apply
Right.
if you have this
Right.
little
Right.
portal, in your hand to like anything that you want back home.
Right. Right. Or
Yeah.
you could just
So
translate it on the fly through your phone.
yeah.
And it's amazing. So did you, when you, as you went through high school and started thinking about college, clearly you had a very active imagination, which would have existed whether you stayed in Korea or came here, I'm sure. Were you thinking about going into literature or the creative arts at all?
No, I don't think I ever thought that I would be good at literature again because of, like my being
Sure.
intimidated by the English language and things like that. But I did go to a high school at this place called the Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan,
Mhm.
which is an arts oriented school. So it's a boarding school for kids who want to go into some kind of performing arts, and they do have creative writing, but I never took creative writing classes or anything like that. And I was actually in theater and also music, so I played piano, but I more than anything else I was in theater, and I did musical theater, and so I did a lot of improving and like being doing a lot of method acting and
Hmm.
things like that I think um, really helped me once I made the transition in my 40s to try my hand at creative writing for the first time. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm sitting here right now at the Writer Center in Bethesda,
Hmm.
Maryland, which is where I took my first fiction writing class when
Wow.
I decided to try my hand at fiction. So yeah, so I'm here. Like it's full circle.
So with this arts background, what did you end up doing in those years before before 40?
Right. So being a writer is actually my fifth career.
Yeah.
So I weirdly went into litigation.
Uh-huh.
And the story behind that, it actually kind of still makes me mad to think about it. But when I was in when I was in musical theater, my teachers at that time, when I was a senior, they were like, "Hey, Angie, you're not thinking about going into drama, right, as a profession because you're Asian, and
Oh my
there
goodness.
really aren't Asians, that there aren't really roles for Asians in TV
So we're
or
talking like late
Broadway.
80s kind of at
This is
this
like,
point.
yeah, this is 80s. This is late 80s,
Huh.
and which is true. Like they're like it's hilarious now. It's very ironic because when we're like trying to cast you know, we're talking about casting for various adaptations for like my books and things like that. There are Korean American roles, obviously, people who would be kind of my age, like 40s, 50s, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we can't like there's like two like other than Sandra Oh, there's really no other Korean American.
Hmm.
She's not even Korean American. She's Korean Canadian, but whatever, you know what I mean.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's so people, I think my age around that time were really discouraged from going into those fields. And I think, those teachers had really good hearts. I think they were doing it from a place of concern. Like, we don't want you to starve to death. We want you to be able to do what you're good at. And we hear that you're good at, academics. So why don't you go do something in that?
Hmm.
And so I decided, I was like, what can I do in academics that's like acting? And then I was like thinking about those, lawyers on TV, like LA
Right.
Law.
LA Law. Right. Right
Yeah,
at that time was
exactly.
LA Law.
And the Lincoln lawyer, like
Mhm.
all those things. And so I was like, I will be a litigator, And so
Just
I
like
went to
that.
law
Like,
school. Yeah, so I went to law school, very expensive, obviously, a lot of time. And then once I graduated from law school and went into actual practice of law, that's when I discovered that, yes, I do love being in the courtroom. I really did love that part. I loved
you like
objecting.
the performance.
Yes, I like the performance. I
Yeah.
like telling the story to
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
judge or
Yeah.
to the jury, all that kind of stuff. And I like convincing people. I love all that kind of stuff. But that's like 5% of a lawyer's, a litigator's professional life is
Right. But it's the
actually
only
in
part
the
that the
courtroom.
TV shows. But
Yeah, exactly. And everything else, I hated everything else. Like it was so awful. You're just basically fighting with these people and like who are making everything really personal for no reason whatsoever. It's
right.
just,
Everything about law is rooted in just conflict. And which is why
yes,
my daughter's in law school. That's why I could never do it. It's like, I don't want to spend my day like being snippy with somebody.
exactly. And I would come home and I would be like, these people were really mad at me and they were so mean to me. And they were like, and my husband, who's a great litigator, and he would be like, yeah, that's, of course they're going to be like that. That's like, they're just being lawyers. And I'm like, but I don't like that. Like, I hate conflict. I
Yeah.
hate fighting for the sake of fighting, unless it's, in the courtroom for
Right.
a fun performance.
That's so
So
interesting.
yeah, so I got out of the legal world almost immediately. Like I think I was a lawyer for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I transitioned to business. I was a consultant at McKinsey, which likes to hire former lawyers and
Right.
then like, give them this crash mini MBA course. So
I
that
just
was
read the
really
book When
fun.
Mackenzie Comes to Town.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Is it like
It's
really,
everything you
can I
would
read
want
it?
yeah, I read mostly nonfiction and I was I've been in my former career was hospitality consulting. So I
Mm,
knew all the ENYs and the Kenneth Leventhals and the Arthur
yeah.
Andersons and stuff like that. So I like literally the 6 months ago I read When Mackenzie Comes to Town. I'm like, holy shit.
And is it like juicy? So I should
It,
read it,
it's
huh?
it's very juicy. Yeah, but
Okay.
it's not salacious. It doesn't feel like hearsay. It feels like highly researched.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it really like it's well written,
Yeah.
and it's comprehensive, but it's and it actually talks a lot about, the associates who are very, um, do have their sights on, being a force of change for the good, and then
Yeah.
slowly seeing like, why are we doing business with this government or with this company or with this person? Our values don't align. But yeah, anyway, it's a great read.
Okay. Okay.
So you
Definitely
were with
will.
Mackenzie.
Yeah. So I was with McKinsey for a little bit, and then I left with some of my friends to go start a.com during the 90s because
Yeah,
that was
as
the
one
90s.
does.
That was the
Yeah.
thing to do.
Uh,
Raised a bunch of money, hired we became like a 450 person company within 2.5 years or
oh my
something.
goodness.
And then we were about to IPO, and then the whole
Two,
bottom fell out.
2000. Yeah.
Yep. And my son was born in 2001.
Yeah.
And it was the same month that we were sold off in pieces to a public company. And then so it seemed like a good time to just kind of like, take a step back,
Reassess.
actually get some sleep, de-stress a little bit, that kind of thing. And I blame a lot of what happened from a medical perspective to my first son on just the stress of that time when I was pregnant, because I fired like 400 people when I was in my third trimester.
Oh my,
And so that's got to have some kind of, you know what I
which
mean?
is a great basis for a story to begin with. I'm
Yeah.
sure you had a nickname.
Oh my God. It's
Wow.
just so horrible. And so, he was born really early with like lots of medical
Hmm.
issues. And so I just got to know sort of the hospital system and the insurance system really, really well.
Yeah.
And then it just turned out, and he's totally fine now. Like he's living the best life with his girlfriend in New York. But for the first like 4 or 5 years of his life, there was a lot of medical drama. And
And he
then,
probably needed constant, attention. You probably
oh,
maybe
completely.
between you and your
Yeah.
husband, it was probably difficult to be like, how do we work? Because
Yeah,
he
well,
needs
my
us.
my husband was still a litigator. So
Yeah.
he was like doing the whole law firm thing. So I was home, I was a stay-at-home mom. We had 3 boys, and all 3 kids ended up having some kind of weird medical issue, totally different from each other,
Hmm.
all as babies. All 3 are great now.
How
Um,
stressful though.
yeah, but it was so awful. And so I feel like so that was like when I say that being a stay-at-home mom was like my most stressful and taxing and, most intense career like I've ever had and will ever have. Like that's so,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it
you
was
can't quit
intense.
for first of all.
Oh, absolutely. Right, right. Like can't quit, like have to do all the stuff.
And it's all
And there was like
emotional. Yeah.
one day when I was in the middle of like grocery shopping, which I hate. I hate grocery shopping. I hate cooking. And I
Mhm.
had to cook everything from scratch because one of my kids had celiac disease
Oh,
back when they did
yep,
not have
yep.
gluten-free aisles.
Right.
And then another kid was deathly allergic to all nuts and shellfish. So like anything that you could use to make gluten-free flour at that time, he was like totally allergic to. Um,
Oh my goodness.
and so I was like in the middle of this Whole Foods, and I was like so exasperated because I couldn't find anything that I could just
Right.
buy
Right.
for their preschool snack or whatever, that I could
Right.
just send along. And they were like refusing to eat any more apple slices because that's what I
Right. They've
gave
had
them
enough.
every single day. And I was just so upset. And I started crying in the middle of Whole Foods. And this friend comes up to me and is like, Angie, is that you? We haven't seen you in so long. Like, where have you been? And she's giving me this huge hug. And so I like unload
Oh
and I
wow.
tell her
Yeah.
my whole story. And then I felt so much better,
Right.
like having
You
told the
needed
story.
that. Yeah.
And so that night, after the kids went to sleep, instead of like cleaning dishes and all that kind of stuff that I should have been doing, my husband was like away on a trial or something. I just like forgot about everything and I just opened up my laptop and I just started writing. And
Hmm.
and I wrote like essays based on what I'd been going through with my kids, and it was so cathartic. I had never
Mhm.
really kept like journals, and you know what I mean. So it
Yeah.
was really like the first time that I was writing something that was really meaningful in that way and personal. And when my husband came home and then he read it, he loved it, and he said, you should really try to get this published. Except he was like, but he was worried about medical privacy issues for our kids and like, future insurability, things like that. I mean,
Sure.
obviously he's a lawyer, you can
Right.
tell.
Right. Right. You're
And
discussing all these pre-existing conditions.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so he was like, that's when he was like, why not try fiction?
Right.
And I was like, I don't know how to write fiction. Like I've been an avid reader, but I don't know how to write like stories. And so that's when I came here to the Writer Center because somebody had told me that they have classes on fiction writing. And I took my first workshop on short story writing. And I was in my
That was the
40s,
beginning.
and that's when I first started.
That's amazing. And I think, people don't appreciate how much, you think about a fiction writer and a novelist, and especially one who's a career novelist. And I think the outside world looks at that person and says, like, yeah, they're a very creative individual and they have the ability to do this thing, like a scientist has an ability to do a certain thing. And I don't think there's an appreciation for the fact that for us, it is therapeutic.
Oh,
There
yeah.
is, even if it's a story that you think is disconnected from you, it never really is. There's
No.
always stuff that
Mm-mm.
you're subconsciously, I think, working through in a way or exploring. And I think when you get to mystery, suspense, thriller, you're able to kind of explore stuff that's a little scary
Mhm.
from a place of safety.
Yeah.
And because I'll write a scene and be like, why did that come out of my head?
Yeah, right. And also explore why people do bad things,
Right,
and to really and to ask those questions, like, could somebody who's like a normal, good person,
right.
do that?
Could I do
And
that? Right.
yes. And could I do that? Could I have those thoughts? And,
Yeah,
we all do, right? We all have those thoughts that we would be
100%.
so ashamed to say out loud.
Yeah,
And so you can give them to characters and explore that, and really explore the nuances of things like that you yourself would never want to do because it scares you too much.
totally. Yeah, I know. And I'm sure you've gotten asked this question too. And I certainly get asked this question. It's like, well, why do you write such dark stuff?
Yeah.
And I just it feels like a very naive question to me, because to your point, everyone has these thoughts. So for example, a person who constantly goes to the worst case scenario in their head, like, I haven't heard from my spouse in 20 minutes. What if they're dead or whatever it is?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yes.
We're
Exactly.
we're just exploring, like, well, what would, and then we start taking it further. What would that mean, therefore,
Yeah.
to this character if that person is dead? We all
Exactly.
have these thoughts. We're just kind of really exploring the ramifications of them, I think.
Yeah. And in a way that I think is probably healthier,
I think
right?
that, yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
cliche that we've heard is like thriller writers are just the nicest people in the world, and
Right.
romance writers are can be really
Right.
horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I remember because my first novel, Miracle Creek, has to deal there's a dead child who
Yeah,
dies in, the very, very beginning of it, like the page number 3 or something like that. And, and that's that was my worst fear. And
right.
so it's exploring those worst fears and then seeing, if that happened to somebody like me, what would that do, and how would that person react, if they were accused of that child's murder, and how would they
Right.
react, and all of those things.
Yeah, and I think it's funny how you kind of talk about it, and it's fascinating how you talk about your entry into writing through nonfiction therapy. And I think the hard part, because I think we all kind of start that way, whether we're intentionally writing fiction at the beginning or not, we're all writing from a place of, getting emotions out,
Yeah.
and exploring what would we do. And I think the talent that you have to discover writing fiction is, all right, is this interesting? Just because it's
Yeah.
what I would do, does that make it an interesting commercial story? Because I struggled a lot with my early books, the ones that didn't sell, with my heroes
Mm.
being too weak. Because I'm like, what would I
Mm.
do? I'm like, I'd get my ass kicked is what would happen. And
Yeah.
so my characters are always getting their asses kicked.
Right,
And
right,
they're like, no one wants to read that. And I'm like, all right, how do I take
right.
what I would do and add 30% more bravery or whatever it is?
Exactly, exactly.
And that's a really hard, for me, it was a really hard thing to learn. And you get
Yeah.
that from reading and watching shows and stuff like that, and what resonates.
Yeah, I think for me that's what differentiated nonfiction from fiction. So it could be that just the way that I started writing fiction helped me, because so my first story that I ever wrote, what I did was take that essay that my husband said was great, but
Right.
it's too, revealing, blah, 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 blah. Um, and to fictionalize it, I had to make the narrator into somebody who was different from me. I made the kids, deliberately different from my kids so that
Right.
they would be disguised. And I still put them in the same um kind of shoes as far as the situation
Right.
of it, just the basic outline of it. But for the most part, like for me, the process of fiction was, okay, if these people are different and their backgrounds are different and their thought processes are different, how would they handle this situation different from how I would?
Right.
And really thinking about that and trying to make myself kind of like method acting, but I call it method writing,
Yeah.
putting myself into making myself into a different person and really trying to think and feel like that other person would feel that and I had to basically put the constraint that I put onto it was that they have to react differently than I would, because again, the whole point was to try to
Right.
disguise it.
Right.
And so I think because I was doing it that way, it made it easy for me to try to fictionalize in a way that is naturally different from how I would do it, even though a lot of my, tendencies and the situations and maybe even the conversations might be from real life. Does
Or
that make
even
sense?
or even some of the subject matter. So for example, like obviously talking about your kids and their medical issues, like Happiness Falls, you have a
Right.
kid who has some medical issues. And so you're still trying to distance yourself. Okay, but I'm the mom of this fictional kid, and I got to react differently than I would react. But it's a situation that I have some familiarity with.
Right.
That's fascinating, and I wonder if and I'm sure your training in acting probably did absolutely like help with that because you're like,
Yeah.
I'm studying this, I'm doing a character study, and I've got to work within
Yes.
the parameter of this character. So do you sit down when you're working on a novel, at least with your protagonist, and really flesh that person out before you even start writing?
I don't. I flesh that person out as I'm writing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
same with
I
me.
threw a
Yeah,
lot of free writing.
yeah,
So I don't do like bios and things like that.
yeah, me neither.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that just feels artificial. I
Yeah,
think because I think when you do it with a character that you're playing, you have the situations in front of you.
right.
So you can like flesh out the character's background and things in a way that makes sense for that character's, words and actions.
Yeah.
And I think for me, for novel writing or storytelling, I think it's much more, where I'm trying to discover what they would do. And by doing that, it's an iterative process of trying to figure out this person's makeup and background as they are kind of expressed and realized through the stories, dialogue and other things that are going on.
Totally. I find that the main character's core emotion is not something that I can necessarily from the outset say it's going to be this. It evolves, I think it's a little precious when people say the characters start talking to me and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
for me, I do believe like, and maybe it's my core emotion of that moment of that
Mhm.
year, whatever coming through. But all of a sudden I'll realize like this person, I feel they just feel more naturally angry than I think I expected. And so I'm going to
Right.
lean into that.
Yes.
And that informs how they make certain decisions. And then you sort of, why are they angry? And then you're like, what happened to
Right.
them in their past?
Exactly. Exactly. It's that iteration back and forth that I love. And it's
Yeah.
just that's when I feel like the magic happens. And that's when I feel like, yeah, like you do feel like the universe is kind of like feeding you and giving you little gifts.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think for aspiring writers, I think what's scary is if you're a natural pantser, like I am, like
Yes.
you
And I
start
am
having
too.
those
Yeah.
feelings and then you start to be like, well, I'm 100 pages in, and if they're really like X, then I've got to, you start getting scared about having to make major changes,
Yeah.
and you just can't let that limit you. It's going to be hard no matter what you do. But I think
Exactly.
if you write to like what you're feeling is the core of this character in an honest and organic way,
Yeah.
the rewrites won't be terrible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think the rewrite is the first draft for me is like kind of discovering the outlines of that character. And then the rewrite is when you can, you know, really fill in some of those details that you didn't
Yeah.
know when you were first writing, you know?
Yeah, I know. I'm very much a believer in that first draft being, I'll look at it once, like halfway through, I'll go back and reread it just to remember because a lot of times I don't remember what I've even
Oh
written.
yeah, totally.
Um, but I'm always kind of surprised about how much, like how little rewrites I do, like probably 3 or 4 rewrites before I give it to my agent, but I'm not gutting it.
Mm.
Because ultimately there's just stuff I can't see.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's where I
absolutely.
rely on my agent, my editor. And I might have months of rewrites based on what they
Yes,
see or what their reaction is.
right.
Because they also know the market, and they're thinking about that and your own personal kind of what
Yeah,
maybe your readers are expecting from you.
yeah.
So it gets hard, but there's only so much you can do before you need that second
Oh,
opinion to be
definitely. Yeah, I write in order to give to other people and see what they say.
right, right.
Yeah,
Are you still
absolutely.
in like a critique group and stuff like that?
Yes, I'm in several. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love critique groups. And I have like critique partners that I just actually got one full length novel today from one of my critique partners. I'm so excited to start reading.
Wow. But
Um
that's a big
and
commitment.
it is. It's a huge commitment, especially, I have some medical issues that limit my reading time. So I am having to sort of do less line editing and more just like kind of high, overview, like pacing, that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how I'm able to do that kind of critique partnering, and as I go through this. But I also have the same monthly
Critique group.
in-person critique group that
Yeah.
came together here at the Writer Center. We still get together like once a month, maybe once every 2 months, just depending on people's schedules now. But yeah, we
Yeah.
still do that. And it's so valuable. Like those are my deadlines. Like because
Well,
otherwise I
that's a
would just
good
never
point
do
too. Yeah,
anything. Yeah.
right. Yeah, I was in critique group for about 20 years and then a couple years ago I left it. And I just at this point I'd like to be in my head for that first. So
Yeah.
no, I'm at the point now where yes, I need to give my agent, my editor some kind of idea of what I'm
Yeah.
working on.
Yeah.
And then I'll give them the first 100 pages just to make sure
Yeah.
it's not like a shit show.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise it's just I like to be in my little because things change all the time.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
find with a
Yeah.
critique, I'd give them a chapter and realize like later on, like this chapter's not even in the book anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know so many people who just rely, only on like maybe their spouse or, something like that. But for the most part, just their agent and their editor now,
Yeah.
especially the people who do a lot of who write a lot more fast, like you
Yeah.
do. Like I know
Yeah.
Chris Pajalian, we were in it was funny because we were in a writing critique group together. And he was like, you know what, guys, I'm not going to actually give you guys anything to critique because I don't like showing my work to anyone except for my agent and the editor. And we were like, oh, we feel so guilty, like having the value of your input, but not, giving back
But if it works
to
for them,
people.
that's fine
Absolutely.
too,
Right,
too.
right, right, right.
I find it, fascinating that, and I've, over 250 episodes of this, just hearing how people become writers. And 80% of the time was never what they intended to do, right?
Right.
In fact, I have probably several dozen people who were lawyers first.
Yeah, I'm
But it just
sure.
you listening to your story and especially the angle of coming to a country where you don't know the language, a very difficult language for somebody without a romance language background,
Mhm.
and then becoming a writer in that language. It just proves that, if you're a writer, it's going to come out. It's going to come
Yeah,
out,
absolutely. It will
whatever. And
definitely
what
come out.
the circumstances will always align. And I think the hardest part of it is then recognizing that and then sticking to it
Yeah.
because those two things are the sword that cuts down most writers.
Yeah.
It's they don't see that, they don't take it seriously and then they're not consistent with it.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to hear like this is your fifth career, but this is probably with the exception of also maybe acting, this is probably what you were meant to do with your life.
I hope, yeah. I mean, I really do feel like when I finished that first story, I do remember and like, and not just finished it, like drafting it, but like really revising it and, having it be ready for submission to a lit mag or something like that. I remember like rereading it and being like, this is what I have been looking for. Like, through all of these jobs and job to job, career to career is like that thing that brings me like happiness on a day-to-day level, and also that macro level satisfaction of like I'm kind of proud of what I
Right.
created here.
Right.
It's those two levels that I think are really, really hard to find, and I think it's worth trying to go from thing to thing, trying to find that, for yourself,
Totally.
whatever that may be.
Yeah, and it's a very intangible feeling, but it's a sense of I'm being true to who I am.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's not to say you can't get that with other jobs. Of course you
yeah,
can.
yeah,
But, all my work in the corporate arena, I might have loved the job. I might have certainly loved the people I was working
yeah,
with, but was it my vision? Was it my, like, would I have started this company?
right,
And so you always kind of felt like, yeah, it's fine.
yeah,
But as a novelist, you could be making a fraction of the money and be like, yeah, this just comes out of my head and I'm
absolutely,
learning. And it's just,
yeah,
you can't replace that, I think. I
exactly,
think he is trying to
exactly.
figure out how to make money doing it.
I know. It's just great. Yeah. It's just like we're very, very lucky to be doing what we're doing and to actually be able to,
Totally.
like, yeah.
Totally. Well, Angie, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our little storytelling. So I've got
Okay, great.
3 books here. We're going to pick one of them and we're going to pick a random sentence from a random page. And I'm going to read that
Okay.
sentence. And that'll be the first sentence in like a 2-minute long short story. We'll just
Okay.
alternate sentences and see where it goes.
Okay.
I've got Ali Land's Good Me, Bad Me.
Ooh.
Nonfiction, Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking,
Oh, okay.
which is very depressing, but beautifully written. And Darcy Coates' horror novel From Below. So choose one of those.
I will do Joan Didion just
All
because
right, we
I
haven't done
love the cover,
nonfiction
and
in a long
also it's
time.
nonfiction and
Yeah, it's beautifully written. Give me a page between 1 and 226.
185.
Okay, I'm going to quickly scan 185 and see it's the beginning of chapter 16. I'm just going to read the first line from this chapter, and you can do whatever
Okay,
you want with it.
great.
Um, I knew what John meant when he said we were not having any fun.
Does it matter that I don't know who John is? That I don't
It's
remember?
your
Okay.
story.
Okay.
This is all improv.
He meant, of course, that he wasn't having any fun.
It was a tired discussion in what was rapidly becoming a tired relationship. 10 years in, and he still thought the marriage would be what it was from day one.
But of course, that's all my fault too.
But I don't think he knew. I don't think he really knew. I don't think he knew what I was doing on those nights, on those weekends. But there was something he could sense about me that had changed. And so when he said there was no more fun, he meant I was no more fun.
And it made me wonder, was that because I was saving all of my fun for other people other than him? Because I felt like I was still having a lot of fun, probably even more fun than I had back when we first started. And he was the only partner with whom I was allowed to have any fun.
All of this raced through my head. to such an extent, I think I lost time, forgetting he had barely even muttered those words. And the only thing that pulled me from my daydreaming was when he pulled the car over onto a dirt road that I'd never seen before, slowed, and said, "We need to talk."
What do we need to talk about? I said. And exactly where are we again? Because I feel like this is kind of a dangerous place for you to pull over.
I stared at him, not wanting to make eye contact, just a glance. And that's when I noticed the sweat on the back of his neck, on the side of his face, the white of his knuckles as he gripped the steering wheel, even though the car wasn't moving.
Honey, I said, as gently and softly as I could, is something going on? Because I thought we were having a nice discussion about our relationship and how we need to put a little more life back into our, relationship.
"Life," he muttered. And then he chuckled to himself in a way that I don't think I'd ever heard before. "Yeah, let's talk about life."
And that's when I started to get scared for the first time since I had met him in college. And I thought, why are we actually here? Has he brought me to a place that is isolated and scary and dark on purpose?
Oh, I think we call it there.
All right.
I got scared.
That was so fun.
I know, isn't that fun?
It's so fun. I
I'm like,
love
how
that.
do we turn this into murder?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. As soon as you went there, at first it was like just,
Right.
domestic.
It was very Joan
whatever.
Didion-ish.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it went to Angie and
And
Carter.
it went into like serial murderer.
Angie, what a pleasure to talk to you again. I felt so honored that I got to talk to you on stage in Broomfield, and it was nice. And I feel like we didn't really cover all the same stuff, so it was good to explore
we
your
had
brain a
so
little bit
much
more.
fun. You were like the best interviewer, and we even did 2 different sessions
Yeah,
in
we
one
did.
day.
We
But you
did.
made it so fun.
Oh, good.
And I'm so happy that we got to do this, and
Yep, me too.
especially this little story creation thing at the end. That's awesome. I
Well,
love this so
well, you're
much.
good at that, and you're very easy to talk to. And yep, absolutely. Let's keep in touch.
Okay, great.
All right, Angie, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. All right, that is it. That is my conversation with Angie Kim. We really went into good detail on that story. It was kind of philosophical before it turned suspenseful, and then before it turned what I assume was going to become murderous. If you want to know everything about Angie, you can check out her website, which is angiekimbooks.com. Hop on over to carterwilson.com if you want to buy my books. My 11th thriller, When They Find Me, is out this November. Please pre-order it if you like my stuff, because pre-orders make a massive difference. You will be my best friend if you pre-order my book. And you can pop on over to unboundwriter.com if you're interested in one-on-one coaching or our Parisian writing retreat with Alex Finlay and Clemence Michelon next May 2027. All right, that is it. Thank you, as always, for watching and or listening to this. And, of course, another episode out just next week. In the meantime, friends, take care.